The clock at the factory gate didn't so much tick as exhale. Like a worn-out beast relieved I wouldn't be prodding it anymore. 40 years, and the last punch landed soft as a sigh. The guard gave me a nod that might have been respect or habit. I carried my little cardboard box, 3 pictures, a coffee mug with a chipped rim, the pen that never leaked, out into a sky that suddenly seemed too wide for a man who'd lived by shift whistles and lunch pails. On the drive home, I rehearsed the small moment I'd always imagined. Not champagne, just the simple warmth of being seen. Well done, Dad. Maybe a hug. The radio babbled about traffic and weather. I turned it down, thinking I wanted to hear the sound of my own tires on the road, something honest. The house was as it always was at 5. The kitchen light on, a cutting board dotted with onion skins, the faint detergent smell that clung to our dish towels no matter how often we washed them. My son was at the table in his work shirt, sleeves rolled, face buried in his phone like it contained oxygen. His wife stood at the stove coaxing a pot to behave. I set the box on the counter and let my smile get ahead of me. Today was my last day, I said. 40 years. I did it. The fork slipped from his hand. It made an ugly little clatter, and the sound felt like a verdict. She turned, lips already pressed in as if preparing to hold back a flood. Silence stretched between us, a rubber band drawn to snapping. What? He said, as if I confessed to a crime in broad daylight. You quit? Retired? I corrected, softer than I meant to. I thought we might. We don't need another mouth to feed. He cut in, like a manager closing a meeting. You're not just going to sit around here. The words landed with a dull, familiar weight. I'd lifted heavier things in my life, steel beams, pallets of parts, but never anything that pressed down so precisely. His wife's face cleared, relief at a script she knew. He's right, Douglas. People your age work all the time. It's not the 1950s. I looked at the meatloaf. My favorite. Under the fluorescent light, it glistened like an apology someone forgot to say. I thought about the checks I'd written in quiet kitchens like this one, the tuition notice trembling in my hand the night he called home, scared. I thought about the wedding invoice I'd quietly settled while they danced with their eyes closed. You're right, I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to a man who had already agreed. Something in me stepped back, like a tide obeying the moon. I smiled again, but the shape of it had changed. I should have asked. We'll figure something out. He nodded, a ruler against a desk. Good. Tomorrow. We'll get you a job. The TV came on in the living room. Laughter from a show bled through the wall like perfume. I stood at the sink and washed the single fork he dropped, running my thumb along the prongs as if polishing a medal I hadn't earned. The house creaked around us, kind and indifferent. I dried the fork, set it back by his plate, and felt the first small crack form, clean, cold, and invisible from across the room. I smiled into the window's dark pane and practiced the expression I would wear while I learned who my son had become. They set the table like they were laying out evidence, plates too close, knives squared to the edge, glasses lined up like witnesses. The meatloaf from last night was back, sliced, reheated, a second appearance that felt less like dinner and more like a reminder. My son kept his phone face down by his fork, as if it were a pistol he'd promised not to use. His wife had a stack of printed budgets beside the salt, paper smelling faintly of toner, and a victory she hadn't earned yet. We talked, she began, before grace, before the first bite. And we think it's best if you contribute. Immediately. My son cleared his throat with a sound I recognized from years of shop floors and safety briefings, authority borrowed from a handbook. There's an opening for night cleaning at my company. You start Monday. Or, he let the word hang between us, a coat on a hook, waiting to be claimed. Or we'll need you to find another place. The radiator gave a small, tired hiss, as if even the house wanted to be anywhere else. I cut a corner of meatloaf and let it cool on my tongue. It tasted like the recipe I loved and the apology they didn't. The budgets fluttered when the vent kicked on. January's numbers had been circled twice. In the margins, someone had written groceries with 3 exclamation points, as if hunger were a surprise. I can make some calls, I said mildly. See what fits. You don't choose, he said, too fast. You take what's offered. He looked at me the way a foreman looks at a pallet, useful if it moves, a problem if it doesn't. She slid a paper across to me. Your pension. Her pen tapped a neat square. Deposit it here. We'll handle the bills. It'll be easier. Easier. I thought of the factory clock, the way it coughed me out at the end of each shift and took me back in the morning, uncomplaining. I thought of the summer my boy broke his wrist, and I carried him like fragile freight to the ER, whispering that pain meant he was alive. He'd believed me then. He believed other things now. You'll stay in your room when we have guests, she added, stacking rules like saucers. This isn't a retirement home. The fork in my hand felt heavier than steel. I set it down gently, careful not to let it slip. Of course, I said. The words fit easily, made of something pliable and old, habit, maybe. The smile came without effort, a well-worn jacket I could shrug into in the dark. He relaxed a fraction, misreading the angle of my shoulders. Good. We're on the same page. Pages. He didn't know how many I had kept to myself, notes scribbled in the margins of a life lived small on purpose. I watched the way his eyes slid to the phone and back again, how her fingers smoothed the budgets even after they lay flat. People reveal themselves in the creases, not the headlines. Monday, he said. 7 a.m. Don't be late. I wouldn't dream of it. Afterward, I did the dishes. The warm water ran over my wrists, a steady, good hurt. Their voices drifted from the living room, laughter from a show, the low hum of relief. In the window's reflection, I tried on my new expression, agreeable, forgettable, the kind of face no one watches too closely. It looked almost natural. The first plan does, when it's only a decision to be patient. The house thins out at night. The walls hold their breath, the vents murmur, the refrigerator clicks like a metronome for a song no one remembers. I lay on my narrow bed and watched headlights sift through the blinds, turning the ceiling into a slow river of light. Sleep idled at the curb and never got out. On the other side of the drywall, voices rose and fell. First the careful murmur of married people solving the world, then the pointed edges that come out when the world doesn't bend. He'll hand over the pension, she said, not wondering, just arranging. Paper rustled. A phone chimed. We'll manage it. Bills first. Groceries. He doesn't need pocket money. He needs to cooperate, my son replied, his voice pitched to that managerial calm that always sounds like a warning if you've been around machinery long enough. If he drags his feet, I'm calling that place Jerry used for his mom. They can take him next month. A place. I pictured a hallway that smelled like bleach and microwave carrots. A TV mounted too high. Chairs with arms tall enough to corral the unsteady. A nurse with tired kindness and a clipboard that made every decision feel official. My fingers closed around the sheet as if it were a rope, and there were a drop beneath me. We can't be a safety net forever, she said. It's not fair. He eats, he showers, electricity isn't free. He should be grateful we've let him stay this long. Grateful. I let the word sit in my mouth like a coin. How many times had I been grateful for a shift that didn't get cut, for a foreman who forgot my name, for a car that decided to start when it was 10 below. Gratitude is a kind of muscle. It remembers, even when the body forgets who carried what. If he argues, my son continued, we set a deadline. 1 week to show a pay stub, or we arrange the home. I'm not losing another month of savings. They laughed then, short, relieved barks, the sound of a problem solved in theory. The sound went through the wall and through my chest. I lay still and counted their breaths until the room went quiet again. The house exhaled, the radiator clicked, the neighborhood dog announced a passing raccoon and then forgave it. Shock did its lap around my skull, one hot sprint, and then left me for something cooler. I could feel it, the temperature falling inside me, the way steel settles after it's bent. 40 years had taught me how to wait out the heat until the shape holds. I stared at the ceiling until the headlight river dried up and the dark found its resting place. In the dresser mirror's corner, my face hovered, half ghost, the map of a life etched in lines no one in the living room could read. I thought about the checks I'd written without signatures they'd recognize, about old handshakes that turned into buildings, about names on paper that didn't match the mail on this address. They thought the walls were thick enough. They were wrong. Tonight they taught me everything I needed to know. I shut my eyes and practiced the smile I would wear in the morning, the one that says yes while my hands measure, quietly, where to place the first wedge. Morning light found the old dents in my knuckles, and made them shine, like metals no one pinned. I sat on the edge of the bed and took stock the way I used to at the end of graveyard shifts. What came in, what went out, what kept the roof from learning how to leak. People think sacrifice is one big gesture, a banner held high. Mostly it's receipts and quiet decisions made while the coffee is still thinking about boiling. There were the double shifts that turned my bones into a chorus of small complaints. The foreman's clipboard, the whistle that split the day into pieces, the vending machine dinners eaten standing because if you sit, you might not get up. I traded sleep for overtime so a boy could have textbooks that didn't smell like mildew and someone else's answers. When tuition hikes arrived like surprise winters, I did the math with a pencil, and then with my back. We didn't talk about it. He called from a dorm room full of borrowed furniture. I told him to study, not worry. The factory clock kept time for both of us. His waiting wanted to be modest and forgot. I watched costs grow like ivy, creeping over every part of the plan. The florist's estimate, the photographer's package, the extra tables for the cousins who RSVP'd late and loud. I wrote a check in a quiet bank and didn't mention the overtime stitched into it. I stood in the back and saw them dancing under lights I'd bought, their laughter sugared by a cake that arrived in a box with a price I folded twice before I put it away. The house came later, the one whose front steps I fixed after work until my knees learned the names of each rung on the ladder. I brought the down payment in an envelope and pretended the bank manager's handshake was just good manners. The realtor congratulated them on their start. I kept the key they gave me on a ring that also held the locker tag from the plant, the weight almost the same. All those years, I could have moved different. There were investments tucked away like winter bills, out of sight, so they wouldn't frost the windows. Early money placed in a friend's risky idea, signed with hands that believed in work more than promises. It paid off slowly, like a field that pretends to be fallow until it decides to grow. I kept the dividends quiet. Better to be thought generous than rich, safer to be underestimated than desired. Modesty wasn't poverty, it was a choice about noise. A plain truck that started every morning. Boots resoled twice. A coat patched at the elbow because it still kept out the wind. I like being the man who could be counted on, not the man counted by. Humility makes a cleaner room in a house. Wealth invites dust you have to keep explaining. Now, with voices in the next room measuring me like a line item, I traced the ledger of years and found I didn't regret the entries. I'd paid the bill for a life and received its quiet in return. If they mistook quiet for empty, that was on them. I know what's set aside, and why. I know what can be moved, and when. He waited until the coffee was poured, as if employment required caffeine to go down smooth. The phone lay between us on the table, screen black, a little mirror that kept my face in the corner like a watermark. He cleared his throat and slid a printed page across the wood. Company logo at the top, bullet points marching like soldiers. Title, Custodial Support Nights. Start time, 7 a.m., which told me whoever wrote it hadn't met the sunrise in a while. Good news, he said, the same tone he used when announcing a sale at the hardware store. I talked to my boss. We can get you in Monday. It's simple work. Mopping, trash, bathrooms. You don't have to think. Show up, follow orders. He said it kindly, the way you explain to a child how to tie shoes, loop, swoop, pull, because he believes you don't know your own hands. His wife hovered by the counter, sugar jar in one hand, approval in the other. It'll be good for you, she added. Routine, purpose. Keep you out of the house. I read the page twice. The ink still smelled new. I took in the pay rate, the uniform requirement, the list of duties that could have been written for any building with floors and people, and the need to pretend one didn't ruin the other. In the corner, a small box for signatures. I placed my finger on it and felt the table through the paper. Whitmore Industries, I said, as if reading it out loud helped the letters earn their keep. The name sat heavy in my mouth, familiar as a tune you hear from a passing car and hum without remembering who sang it. That's right, he said, brightening. I'll tell Leonard you're grateful. He's understanding. As a favor to me. I nodded the way a man nods at the weather report. I appreciate the opportunity. The words were easy. They always have been. People forget how much of a life can be lived by choosing the right size of yes. He slid a pen over with a small flourish, and I signed where the box asked. My name looked tidy, like it showed up early. He exhaled, shoulders dropping, some inner ledger balanced. See? Already better, he said. Monday. 7. Don't embarrass me. Wouldn't dream of it, I answered, and let the smile arrive, the same one that had made Foreman underestimate the questions I asked, that had gotten me through union votes and family arguments and the kind of doctor's visits where you leave with a new pill and an old worry. He started talking schedules and parking passes. I listened to the cadence more than the content, the way a man listens to a machine he's worked beside for years, checking for rattles. The name Whitmore kept ringing in the metal, a note only I seemed to hear. I pictured a long hallway of glass and polished stone, the echo of footsteps that had once followed me out of a garage with a handshake and a promise. I pictured a mop in my hand and a door that didn't look like a door unless you knew where to press. Monday, he repeated, as if saying it twice pinned the day to the calendar better. I folded the paper into thirds, slid it into my pocket, and rinsed our cups in the sink. The coffee ground smelled like soil after rain. I'll be ready, I said to the window, practicing the shape of surrender until it fit like a glove. Outside, the street kept moving. Inside, the plan put on its coat and waited by the door. The first check looked like a mistake. Too many zeros for a man wearing a borrowed suit in a garage that smelled like cut pine and ambition. Leonard had a folding table for a desk and a whiteboard that squeaked when you breathed near it. He drew boxes and arrows, talked about margins and machining tolerances, about doing one thing perfectly and selling it to people who hated surprises. I listened the way I listened to engines, past the noise, into the rhythm underneath. When he finished, he waited like men do when they've learned how to carry their own fear without dropping it. I can put in 50, I said, then swallowed. 1,000. He blinked once. No one at the plant would have guessed I had that kind of money. That was the point. I'd been tucking away bits and pieces for years, small dollars that pretended to be smaller, a little side work fixing what other folks broke, a habit of wanting less. I'd sold a parcel of scrub land my brother never saw value in, held onto a payout from an accident that only bruised me where a lawyer couldn't photograph it. Money accumulates if you don't feed it attention. We shook hands with Palm and I, the only contract that mattered before the lawyers wrote one down. You sure you don't want a title? Leonard asked. VP of something. People like plaques. I like results, I told him. And I like quiet. Put my name where it needs to be and nowhere else. That first winter, I spent Saturdays in a garage sweeping sawdust and listening to the thrum of early machines. I learned the names of parts like prayer, felt the heat of risk coming off the drill presses. When orders were late, I drove. When a supplier tried to muscle terms, I sat across the table and smiled until they remembered the price of stubborn. I wasn't on the website. I didn't pose for pictures. But there's a kind of weight you lend a room by showing up and not needing credit for it. Years turned, the garage became a warehouse, the warehouse a campus with glass that reflected the sky so clean it looked borrowed. Whitmore Industries sprouted departments like LIMS, R&D, procurement, compliance, each with its own language and calendar. The logo sharpened, the stationery got thicker. Dividends arrived on schedule, tidy as paychecks. I let the envelopes stack in a drawer before I took them to the bank, a ritual that reminded me money is a tool, not a drum. Leonard offered board seats, public thanks, photo ops under banners that said milestone and vision. I declined the way you push a plate of dessert away when you've already had enough. One day you'll have to step into the light, he'd say, half teasing, half warning. Maybe, I answered. If the light is needed. If not, let it fall on the work. I stayed small at home on purpose. A modest truck. A watch without a logo. I taught my hands to forget the weight of the checks as soon as they folded back into the wallet. People are kinder to a man they think has nothing to take. They're also more honest about what they want. The quiet steak buys you leverage measured in phone calls returned and doors opened with a soft click. It lets you move without making ripples. It keeps you close to the instruments, the gauges that tell the rail story, while the press releases clap for themselves. I chose silence because it leaves room for listening. And listening is how you know exactly when to speak, and to whom, And with which name? The uniform hung from a chair like a shed skin. The mop, still zip-tied to its handle, leaned by the door with the patience of things that don't know their props. 7 a.m. came and went with the kettle's quiet whistle and the newspaper spreading its ink across my thumbs. I circled a crossword clue with a dull pencil and waited for the day to notice me not arriving. At 8:15, the phone rattled across the formica as if it wanted to jump to safety. "Where are you?" My son's voice cracked, all the confidence boiled off. "Leonard's waiting. He asked for you by name." My boss tore into me. "Oh," I said, and touched the knot in the robe's belt as if it needed checking. "Was it 8? I must have. Well, you know how these old gears slip." I let a soft laugh run out of steam on its own. The kettle ticked as it cooled. "This isn't funny," he hissed. The background noise told me he was in a hallway with polished floors, the kind that make footsteps sound official. "I vouched for you. I said you were reliable." I pictured Leonard's face as he asked questions he already knew the answers to. Polite confusion wears well on a CEO. "I can come this afternoon," I offered. "Make up the time." "No. Tomorrow. 7:45. Sharp." The word sharp landed like a ruler on knuckles. He hung up hard enough to cut the call in two. I set the phone down and let the silence collect itself again. The cleaning kit sat in its shopping bag by the door, a still life of false beginnings, gloves, rags, a bottle of something blue that promised to erase fingerprints. I poured coffee slow and watched the black circle widen in the cup, a solar eclipse in reverse. By lunch I knew the exact sound his text would make. It arrived like a tiny alarm clock. He wrote that Leonard had been deeply disappointed, that he, my son, had spent 20 minutes explaining why hiring family was a risk worth taking. He ended with, "Don't do this to me again." "I'll be ready," I said, and nodded at the uniform as if it and I were old friends. He didn't notice that the bag was still sealed. He didn't notice much beyond his own weather. What he felt wasn't quite fear. It was the first wobble, the small roll of a ladder foot on dust. He'd spent days arranging my life into neat lists and discovered one item refused to line up. In the thin slice of quiet after he left the room, I could almost hear it, the idea that he might not be in charge, tilting on its hinges. The paper didn't mean to confess. It just lay there on the kitchen counter beside a coffee ring and a spoon, edges curled the way documents do when they've been read too many times by someone with a nervous thumb. Henderson and Associates in a neat serif at the top, itemized lines below that looked ordinary if you didn't know what ordinary costs. I rinsed my cup slower than necessary and let my eyes walk the columns. Office supplies, $847.50. Equipment maintenance, $1,734. The numbers wore the right clothes, but not the right shape. You work decades around invoices and bid sheets, and your brain learns the weight of things. Pens don't cost that much. Filters don't line up like that unless someone wants them to. I took a picture because the phone is quiet when it tells the truth. A little shutter chime, then the dock slipped back under the salt like a child hiding behind a curtain with feet showing. She breezed in and out of the kitchen on a call, voice bright and professional, laughter placed in the right places, like coasters under glasses. When she left for work, she gathered the papers in a stack, slid a band around them as if tidiness could sanctify content, and kissed the air near my cheek. Perfume, lemon, and something expensive. In my room, I laid the photo out on the screen and let the numbers breathe. The pattern was shy at first, then bold. The repeated 500s, the roundups that didn't feel like accidents, the phantom vendor names that sounded invented by a committee. I wrote them in a small notebook that has held other quiet facts over the years, dates, amounts, who signed what. Habit more than suspicion. The pencil left a soft gray trail that meant I could erase it if I had to. There's a man I call when numbers look like they're telling a joke only they find funny. Michael Richardson, bones of an auditor, heart of a mechanic. He loves the way systems ought to hum. We met back when Wigmore was still learning to invoice without tripping over itself. He owed me a favor that never needed collecting, which is the best kind. I dialed his number and listened to the couple of rings you give a friend before you decide you shouldn't have bothered them. "Doug," he said, like he'd been expecting the pass to call. "We talked about weather first, the way men build a porch before they build a house." Then I read him the line items and their coincidences. He whistled low. Send me what you've got. Give me a day. I sent the photos, each one a square of Ordinary trying hard not to be interesting. I closed the laptop and went about my chores as if my hands didn't remember how to knot rope. By evening he wrote back with proofs, vendor receipts, actuals from the other side of the ledger. The mismatch lit up like flare guns. Systematic, he texted. 8 months. About 18 grand. You were right. The house was quiet when I put the printouts in a manila folder and the digital copies on a thumb drive with a sticker that read Christmas lights. I slid both into the bottom drawer under a stack of old warranties. I didn't feel triumph. Just that old, steady sensation of a machine coming into alignment, belt snug, gears seated true. Paper will tell you everything if you let it sit long enough and listen for the pattern. The cursor blinked like a small, patient heartbeat. I'd opened a new account with a name that wouldn't be missed by anyone, 2 nouns and a number, then drafted the kind of message that sounds calm because it has nothing left to prove. Dear Mr. Henderson, I typed, and let the words settle into formal shape. I described discrepancies without adjectives, dates without drama, amounts that carried their own gravity. I attached the files in a steady rhythm. Side-by-side photos, vendor receipts, bank lines that didn't line up even if you squinted. 28 pieces of Ordinary that, together, made something nobody could ignore. I read the email 3 times, the way you check a knot before you lean your weight into it. No fingerprints, no flourishes, just the quiet weight of proof. The send button sat there like a red light at an empty intersection. My finger hovered, not from doubt, but from respect. Acts of consequences. Even necessary ones. I clicked. The progress bar zipped across the screen as if relief could be measured in pixels. Then the window went pale and clean, like snow after the plow. I closed the laptop gently and slid it aside. The manila folder waited on the desk like an old accomplice. I fed the first page into the shredder and listened to the teeth take it. The sound was uncannily satisfying, like dry leaves under a boot, like rope paying out smooth. I kept a slow pace. A machine lasts longer when you don't rush it. Strip after strip, the story turned into confetti no one would throw. The last page stalled for a second, then surrendered. I emptied the bin into a trash bag, knotted it twice, and then settled it under the sink behind the box of dishwasher tabs. The thumb drive went into my pocket, warm from the room, labeled Christmas lights so anyone curious might think I was sentimental about seasonal chores. The house had that afternoon hush when the sun moves to the back windows and the dust decides to dance. I made tea, bag in, kettle sighing, the mug chipped at the rim where the glaze never quite took. The clock on the microwave turned itself over with a soft click. Somewhere across town a desk phone would ring, or an inbox would ping, and a man who cared about ledgers more than gossip would read what I'd sent and call someone in with a legal pad. He would keep his voice even. He would ask for the files. He would say words like audit and scope and immediately. I sat at the table and folded the silence into neat squares. No triumph. That's for winners of games someone else keeps score for. What I felt was alignment, as if the house, its pipes, its joists, its quiet, had shifted onto true. A breeze came through the kitchen screen and ruffled the corner of the newspaper. I smoothed it with 2 fingers and watched my hands. They didn't shake. Phones love bad timing, so I expected the call that didn't come. Instead, the day ticked on, ordinary as a metronome. I rinsed the mug and set it upside down to dry. The shredder cooled, a little smell of warm plastic left behind. I looked at the window and practiced the same old smile. Tomorrow would have a different shape, but today had done exactly what it needed to. I had told the truth, and then I waited, the way you do when you know the truth will get where it's going on its own. The call came before dinner, a sharp ring that startled the spoon in my hand. She answered in the hallway and tried to make her voice professional, but panic has a way of fraying the edges. I watched her posture crumple in increments, shoulders first, then the set of the jaw, then the knees that forgot they were supposed to hold up a person who wore blazers. When she hung up, the phone stayed in her hand like a hot pan she couldn't put down. Suspended, she said to the air. Pending audit. The words were clean and clinical, like the room they'd escorted her out of. I set the spoon down and wiped my hands on a towel that had done its duty for years without filing a grievance. "I'm sorry," I said, because I am, in the way you're sorry when the truth finally touches skin and someone realizes it burns. She blinked like a person waking in a strange house. "They said evidence. Detailed. Dates. Receipts." Her eyes landed on me and kept going, as if I were a lamp or a plant that lived here but didn't factor into the math. The front door opened on the wings of tires taking the corner hard. My son came in already mid-sentence, volume set to breakage. "What happened? Why didn't you call me from the office? Why am I hearing this on the drive?" He smelled like sweat and coffee, and a day that had refused to obey. "They're reviewing everything," she said, and the control she usually wore like a watch slipped off her wrist. "Someone sent, it doesn't matter who. It's bad." He spun on me the way a compass needle jerks when the magnet is too close. "And you," he said, the word you swollen with blame he'd been soaking in all afternoon. "First you embarrassed me with Leonard, now this. Ever since you retired." "I retired long before this," I said, mild as a lake. "What's happening at her office isn't." "Don't," he snapped, pointing as if he could staple my mouth shut. "Don't pretend you don't enjoy this. Your little stunt yesterday put me in front of the CO, made me look like I can't manage my own father. Do you know what that does to a man's reputation?" Reputation is a coat you wear until the weather changes. I kept my hands on the towel and waited for the storm to decide which way it wanted to move. He paced grooves into the kitchen tile, the kind of back and forth that makes a person dizzy if they try to keep up. "From now on," he pronounced, "you don't go anywhere without telling me. You'll be at Whitmore tomorrow at 7:30. I'll drive you, I'll walk you in, I'll clock you if I have to." She leaned against the counter and folded, suddenly small. "They took my badge," she said softly, as if marking the place where a chapter ends. "Security walked me out." My son ignored the softness and clung to the one thing he could still grip: control. He found a pen and began writing times on the back of an envelope, like that was how you kept life in its lane, ink and insistence. "No mistakes tomorrow," he said, stabbing the numbers. "None." "I'll be ready," I said, and his head snapped up, suspicious of ease. "Good," he said, but it sounded like a plea dressed up as an order. After they drifted to separate corners to nurse their private storms, the house settled into that uneasy quiet that follows a play dropped but not shattered. In the reflection on the dark window, 3 masks hung by invisible strings: his anger, her composure, my smile. Hers had slit first. His was cracking from the inside. Mine stayed on because it's made of something sturdier than pretense. It's made of patience. I rinsed the spoon and set it to dry, listening to the brittle laughter of a sitcom through the wall. The audit would take its time, the way thorough things do. My son would push harder, the way frightened men do. And I would keep the temperature steady, turning the dial a notch at a time until the room learned what truth really feels like. He was up before the alarm, already in shoes, already in that tight jaw he wears when he means to bend the day to his will. The uniform he'd bought for me lay across the chair like a sentence, navy polyester with a name patch that said Doug in block letters, as if I might forget. I put it on slow, button by button, the fabric catching on a knuckle scar from a machine that forgot my hand once and remembered it forever. The mop waited by the door, lean and obedient. I picked it up the way you pick up a flag you don't salute. "Keys," he said, palm out, and then remembered he was driving. He herded me to the car, as if I were a delivery that might break. The morning air had the chill that makes exhaust look like breath. We rode mostly in silence. His hand strangled the steering wheel at 10, and 2 like a man auditioning for a public safety poster. Every few blocks he issued a directive. "Don't talk to Leonard unless he talks to you. Don't be late to breaks. Don't wander." "I'll keep to my broom," I said, and watched our neighborhood pass itself off as new in the slanted light. Fresh paint on old wood, young trees trying on the idea of shade. He took the company entrance that eats cars one by one and spits them into assigned places. The Whitmore logo stood on its pedestal, stainless steel catching the sunrise like it was paid to. He glanced at it the way a parishioner nods at a cross, familiar, not intimate. I saw the reflection of the glass facade and some version of myself in it, smaller because glass lies about distance. "Badge," he said, handing me a temporary card. He clipped it to my pocket himself, fingers quick and efficient, like a father dressing a child who can't be trusted with buttons. Stay near me until I hand you off. Inside, the lobby wore its expensive quiet. The floors had the kind of shine you don't get from mops, though mops are asked to maintain it. People moved with purpose, phones glued to their cheeks as if secrets would fall out if they let them go. He walked half a step ahead, posture taller by force. I matched his pace and kept my counsel, the mop now a staff in an old man's hand. He introduced me to a supervisor who smelled faintly of ammonia and ambition. "This is my father," he said, then corrected. "Douglas." I nodded like a man grateful for a place to set his hat. The supervisor showed me a closet full of supplies, and a chart with zones colored in markers that were running out of ink. "Start here," he said, tapping a square. "Corridor A, conference rooms, restrooms at the end. Radios on channel 3. I took the card with both hands, felt the wheels complain, then agree. My son hovered, correcting nothing because there was nothing to correct, then found something anyway. "Don't scratch the walls," he said. "They notice." "I'll be careful," I answered, and meant it. Care is a muscle too. Down the long corridor, the building hummed its morning song, printers waking, doors sighing, voices pitching low deals. I pushed the cart and counted steps, learned the echo, tested the give of the floor under rubber soles. The mop head drank its first bucket like a thirst you plan to pace. He watched me until the elevator closed on his worry and carried it up. Alone, I set the bucket down and looked at my reflection in a brass kick plate, a man in a borrowed uniform, a name on his chest, a job at his hands he didn't need to hate. I smiled at the small, warped version of myself, and the metal smiled back, bent but honest. Then I wrung the mop, stepped into the first room, and began. The lobby breathed money. Marble that pretended not to echo, a staircase that floated because steel hid its effort, a wall of glass tuned to catch the morning and play it back in a richer key. I pushed the cart along the seam where polish meets shadow, the mop handle steady against my palm. My son tracked beside me with the alertness of a man shepherding a fragile delivery. He checked his watch, then checked me, as if time might leak from my sleeves. "Eyes forward," he said under his breath. "Leonard does his rounds about now. If he sees you working, it'll smooth yesterday over." "Understood," I said, and dipped the mop into the bucket just to give my hands something to do with their honesty. He saw Leonard first, the silver hair, the stride of a man who doesn't need to hurry to make the day move. "Mr. Whitmore," my son called, voice raised, posture snapping into its best lines. He moved ahead, creating the tableau he wanted. Dutiful son, obedient father, problem solved. Leonard looked up from his tablet, and the room shifted by a degree I felt in my teeth. His gaze passed over my son, polite, the way a person acknowledges a coworker whose last name they never learn. Then his eyes found me, and all the pretense dropped out of the morning. "Douglas," he said, and the name had in it back rooms and first machines and a folding table that rocked if you leaned wrong. The tablet lowered. His face opened. "What on earth?" My son pivoted, already smiling for credit he hadn't earned. "Sir, I wanted to introduce." Leonard didn't hear him. Or maybe he did and decided it didn't matter. He closed the distance in 3 long strides and reached for my hand, not the way you greet a janitor, but the way you steady a friend you haven't seen in too long. "You should have called," he said, low, the question tucked under the concern. "We'd have sent a car." Around us, conversation snagged and then pretended to continue. People looked with the corners of their eyes, the way offices watch without admitting it. My son's mouth opened and forgot its next word. The badge on my pocket felt suddenly loud. "I wanted the tour," I said, letting the smile find its true shape. "See how my floors are holding up." That landed. Leonard barked a laugh that bounced off the marble and came back as proof. He clapped my shoulder, then turned to my son as if noticing him for the first time. "Christopher," he said evenly, each syllable a measured weight, "explain to me why Douglas Cook is pushing a mop in my lobby." He needed work," my son managed, voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. "I thought." "You thought," Leonard repeated, and the words cooled the air. "You brought one of this company's largest shareholders in here with a mop and a temporary badge." Silence gathered like a meeting. The security guard took half a step closer without meaning to. The receptionist's hands floated above her keyboard like startled birds. I set the mop in the bucket and straightened, the old posture slipping on like a well-kept coat. "It's all right," I said, because kindness costs nothing when you can afford it. "We'll talk upstairs." Leonard nodded once, sharp, the way men do when they agree with the part you didn't say. He gestured toward the elevators. "After you, Doug." I walked past my son. He didn't meet my eye. In the brass of the elevator door, our reflections stood together for a heartbeat. A man who'd chosen quiet, a man who'd mistaken it for emptiness, and then the doors parted with a soft sigh, inviting the rest of the truth in. Marble doesn't just shine, it listens. Every footstep in that lobby sounded like it wanted to remember who made it. I pushed the cart along the edge where the light from the glass wall turned the floor into a lake. The mop handle fit my palm, as if it had known me longer than it had. My son walked half a step ahead, scanning the room as though he could choreograph the morning into forgiving him. "Keep moving," he muttered. "Leonard does the loop at 9. If he sees you working, we're fine." I dipped the mop and wrung it out, not for the floor, already clean enough to eat off, but for the rhythm. Work has a sound you can hide inside. He straightened his tie twice in 10 seconds. When the elevator opened, the air changed a degree. You can tell when a room recognizes someone who owns more of it than the deed says. Leonard came out reading a tablet, the kind of walk that says meetings move to him, not the other way around. My son raised his voice before the distance closed. "Mr. Whitmore." Leonard's eyes lifted and did that small recalculation people do when the present collides with an older truth. He looked past my son, found me, and the tablet stopped being important. "Doug," he said, like a man greeting a memory that still pays dividends. The corners of his mouth softened. "You picked one hell of a morning to surprise me." My son faltered mid-stride. "Sir, this is—" Leonard reached for my hand first. Not a perfunctory shake, but the kind of grip that carries history in it. Garages, early machines, nights counted by invoices instead of hours. "You could have called," he said low. "We'd have sent a car." "I wanted to see the floors," I said. "Make sure my investment isn't scuffed." That got him. He laughed once, sharp enough to bounce off the glass. The receptionist looked up. The security guard stopped pretending not to listen. My son's mouth opened to argue with a reality he hadn't known existed. "Christopher," Leonard said without looking away from me, "why is Mr. Cook holding a mop in my lobby?" "He needed work," my son managed. "I thought—" "You thought," Leonard repeated, and there was no heat in it, just a chill that made the marble truer. "You brought one of our largest shareholders into this building with a temp badge and a custodial card." Silence arrived like a full elevator and stood with us. I set the mop in the bucket and let my back remember how to be tall. There's a way you carry yourself when you sign checks that build staircases. "It's all right," I said, because mercy counts, even here. "Maybe we take this upstairs." Leonard nodded once, the old shorthand. "After you, Doug." I walked by my son. In the brass of the elevator door our reflections met, his face learning, mine done pretending. For a second we were level, then the doors parted with their soft civilized breath. I stepped in. He stayed on the marble a heartbeat too long, balanced on the edge of a truth that had finally found its voice. Leonard's office has a view that makes the city look arranged on purpose. He didn't offer my son a chair. He offered me one, the familiar leather that remembers who sat in it. I stayed standing just long enough to make a point only one of us could hear, then sat. My son hovered near the credenza, clutching his briefcase like it could file an appeal. "Christopher," Leonard said, calm as a level on a workbench, "tell me again, what possessed you to bring Mr. Cook into my building with a mop?" "He retired," my son said too quickly. "We can't support him." "I solved a problem. He needed purpose." The words tumbled over each other, each one bruising the next. Leonard let the silence expand until it fit the room. "You misread the only man in this company I cannot afford to have misread," he said. "You humiliated him in public. You presumed authority you don't have. And you forgot the first rule any decent manager learns: respect travels top down." My son opened his mouth, then saw what I saw, the set of Leonard's jaw when decisions have already been made. "Sir, I—" "No!" Leonard put a hand up, a traffic signal with no yellow. Your judgment is compromised. Your conduct is disgraceful. You are terminated effective immediately. Security will see you out. The words landed without raised voice or theatrics. They didn't need either. Somewhere down the hall, a printer started and stopped. You could hear the building breathing. My son stared like a man trying to translate a language he thought he was fluent in and discovering new alphabets mid-sentence. You're firing me? For helping? He sounded younger than the last time I saw him scared, a boy with a broken wrist at an ER doorway. For diminishing a partner of this company to a prop in your domestic drama, Leonard said. For forgetting that people aren't instruments you tune to your comfort. He pressed a button on the phone. Please send security to my office. Footsteps approached, the measured cadence of men who wear soft shoes and carry authority in their belts. My son's eyes went to me, hunting for an exit I wasn't going to build. The old reflex to rescue twitched, then quieted. Mercy isn't immunity. He tried to lift the briefcase and missed the handle. It hit the rug, then the hardwood edge beyond with a hollow thud that sounded louder than it had a right to. In the stillness that followed, I could hear the little things, the click of the door latch, the tick of the clock you never notice until time stops moving your way. Dad, he said, the words suddenly accurate and small. Say something. I looked at Leonard, then at my son. I won't argue the facts, I said. You did this work yourself. You can do the rest, too. Security stood in the doorway, not cruel, just inevitable. Sir, one of them said, to my son, and the honorific landed like a kindness he didn't know what to do with. He picked up the briefcase, found the handle, and nodded without seeing anyone. Papers inside shifted, a soft rustle like leaves losing their grip. He took 2 steps, paused as if waiting for someone to call him back, then kept going. The door closed behind him with that corporate hush that pretends to be gentle. Leonard exhaled, not relief, not triumph, just the air you let out after lifting something heavier than it looked. He turned to me. I'm sorry it came to that. It came exactly where it needed to, I said. The city lay beyond the glass, steady, unconcerned. In the reflection, I saw a man whose quiet had been mistaken for absence, and a friend who'd never made that mistake. Somewhere down the hall, the elevator chimed. The building kept breathing. Leonard closed the door with the care of a man who knows how sound carries, and when it shouldn't. The city leaned against the glass, all those offices stacked like thoughts in someone else's head. He waited for me to start. Old habit. I let the quiet take shape first, because quiet tells you what kind of words will fit. I'm not going to press charges, I said, and felt the decision settle the way a beam finds its seat on a post. Not against family. Not today. Leonard nodded once, the precise acknowledgement of a man who appreciates limits. It's your call. It is, I said. But I won't be stolen from again. Not my pension, not my time, not my name. If they want help in the future, it comes with conditions in writing on my terms. Spell them, he said, sliding a legal pad toward me. We've always preferred ink to memory when it matters. First, I said, and the word felt less like a number than a gate closing. No access to my accounts. None. I'll manage my own funds. If I choose to assist, it will be by cashier's check or paid invoice, not handouts that blur into entitlement. His pen moved, steady as a lathe. The scratch on paper sounded like something being cut true. Second, respect is not negotiable. The next insult carries consequence, distance, not debate. They don't have to like me. They do have to speak to me like a person. Clear, Leonard murmured. Third, boundaries in the house. Mine or theirs. If I step into their lives, or they into mine, we agree on terms beforehand. No surprises, no ambushes over dinner that turn into ultimatums. He underlined that one. Good fences, he said, and I could hear the farm boy in him the city never managed to pave over. Fourth, I said, and watched my hands while I said it. They work their own problems first. Jobs, debts, audits. I'll offer advice if asked for it directly, not when shouted at between accusations. I will not subsidize denial. The pen paused. He looked up. You're not leaving them with nothing. I'm leaving them with the truth, I said. They can spend that. It's the only currency that appreciates with use. We sat with it. The room had the weight of decisions properly made. I thought of my son as a boy, his head heavy on my shoulder after a long day at the fair, sticky with cotton candy and sleep. The ache that rose then was an old friend. It stood next to the new resolve and didn't try to move it. "I'll have legal draft a simple agreement," Leonard said. "Not an ambush. A tool. You can present it when you're ready." "Thank you," I said. "And I am sorry the lobby had to teach him what our kitchen couldn't." "He taught himself," Leonard answered. "The marble just echoed it back." I stood. The chair sighed like something finished right. "I'll be leaving the house," I said. "On my schedule, not theirs. A small place. Quiet. I'll give them my new number. If they call with respect, I'll pick up. If they call with demands, I won't." "That's a clean line," he said. "You are always good with lines." We shook hands like we did at the beginning. Palm, agreement you can hang weight from. At the door I paused and looked at the city again. So many windows. So many rooms where people think noise equals power. "Close it behind me," I told Leonard, and he did. The latch caught with that expensive hush I've come to value. Out in the hallway, the building kept breathing. I matched it, step for step, carrying nothing that didn't belong to me. Leonard's office holds silence the way a good tool holds an edge. The city pressed against the windows, all the glass stacked like promises. He waited. I let the quiet settle, felt where it wanted the words to go, and set them there. "I'm not dragging family into court," I said. "Not today, not for this." The decision fit like a board finally seated in its notch. "But I'm done being treated like a pocket to turn out or a schedule to manage." He gave one small nod, the kind you use when you're both past persuasion. The legal pad slid across the desk, pen on top, an invitation to make things real. Paper is where confusion goes to die. "They won't touch my accounts," I said. "No logins, no just this month, no cards that live in someone else's wallet. If I help, it's through a bill with a vendor's name on it, or a cashier's check that leaves a trail even a tired auditor could follow." The pen whispered. The words took on weight.